Good morning, Year 5s. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and you're ready for a fantastic day of learning. We're going to be doing our reading lesson, and it's going to be our general vocab lesson. So we're going to be looking at new vocab, which is our learning objective for today. We're going to carry on reading some more of our book, which is Stig in the Dump. And hopefully by the end of this lesson, you will be able to know some new words. Right, so as I said, our skill is looking at vocabulary today, and for the rest of the week, we're going to be focusing on our find and copy skill. Okay, so that's going to be happening tomorrow, but today we're simply going to be focusing on learning what new words mean. So we've been looking at the character Stig, and we're going to look a little bit about what we know so far about him. The two main characters, Stig and Barney, that we've learned so far have got a lot of information about us, and they're giving us kind of a picture about what they are like. So I would like you to have a think about the evidence that they provided about Stig and what this can tell us a little bit about him. So we're going to look at these three questions. So if you need a pen and paper, if you haven't got it ready, go and grab one. If you need to pause the video, please do so. But we're going to look at these three questions and just jot down your ideas. So the first bit of evidence they give us about Stig is that Barney does not recognize Stig's strange grunting language. So what can we infer about Stig's vocabulary and his way of talking? What can this tell us? The second question is Stig is wearing rabbit skins and no shoes or socks. So what does this tell us about Stig? And Stig's hands look very strong and cleverer than his face. This is the evidence they have provided for us. What can we then infer from this? What is that clue telling us about Stig? So have a go at answering those three questions, and then let's have a look at the answers. Right, let's see how you've done. Right, the first one where it says that he got a strange grunting language would indicate the fact that Stig just can't speak English very well. Okay, so he doesn't really produce the sounds of English, and so Barney does find it sometimes tricky to understand him. Right, he's wearing rabbit skins. This tells us that he doesn't own proper clothes or shoes. Okay, so that evidence would then support the fact that he doesn't own normal clothes. And the last bit, that he has very strong hands, tells us that he makes lots of things with his hands. Okay, and he's very good at doing this. And we have learned already in the story so far that he is very creative with his hands, and that he's come up with many ideas in order to survive in this rubbish dump. So, how do you think you feel about Stig, and do you feel sorry for him, and what would be the reasons why? So I would like you to think about both opinions, yes and no. So yes, you feel sorry for Stig. Why would you feel sorry for him? Or no, you don't feel sorry for Stig. So have a think about why one wouldn't feel sorry for him, especially through the eyes of Barney. Okay, Barney doesn't really feel sad for Stig. In fact, he feels quite the opposite. So why do you think we would or wouldn't feel sorry for Stig? So have a go at jotting down some ideas. And then if you need to pause the video, please do so. Right, let's have a look at what you've written. So my idea is that, yes, I would feel sorry for Stig because he lives in a rubbish dump, okay, and he is all alone. He's got nobody around him, it's just himself, and that would be very lonely. So perhaps you had some similar ideas. Or no, in fact, through Barney's eyes, Stig actually lives a very exciting life, okay, so perhaps you wouldn't feel very sorry for him because he's actually got quite an exciting life that he's living. Right, so we're going to carry on reading the next few pages in our book, and I would like you to follow with me, please, and read it out aloud. Normally we do echo reading, which means I would read and then you would repeat what I've read, but today it is just easier if you read with me. So we're going to start on the next page, and we're going to read the next couple of pages together. So please feel free to read them out aloud and to follow with me. There was the bicycle too, just a rusty frame with bits of brake hanging onto it. Never mind, he'd found something much more interesting, and he'd seen it and spoken to it in broad daylight. A real live Stig, and he was going to visit him. That's if he could find his way among the giant nettles. Suddenly there was Stig, coming to meet him straight through a nettle patch, as if stings meant nothing to him. Barney stopped. What now? Shake hands? Rub noses? No, perhaps not. He remembered the apples he had stowed inside his shirt, took one out and held it towards Stig on the palm of his hand, as if he was trying to make friends with the horse. I hope you like the carrot, Stig, said Barney. Have an apple. Stig took the apple quite politely between finger and thumb, not between his teeth, as Barney somehow expected him to, and sniffed it. Barney took out another apple for himself and bit into it. Good, he said, delicious. Stig took a bite, seemed to like it, smiled, and they both started walking towards the den, munching their apples. Stig just blundered through the nettles, and as far as Barney could see, they stung him and raised bumps as they did on other people. But he just didn't care. Barney himself avoided the nettles as much as he could. He got stung once or twice, but decided not to make a fuss about it. Stigs don't mind stings, he thought, so he'd better not. Stig led the way to the den. Barney noticed several dumps of new white chalk near the path, and remembered the new tunneling he had seen yesterday, and the baby's bath full of chalk. Been digging, Stig? He asked, pointing to the dumps. Stig grinned and nodded. It was gloomy and overhung at Stig's end of the pit, even on this bright day, and the den itself, now that the hole in the roof was mended, was even darker. The teapot lamp was flickering and throwing a dim light on the den and the place where Stig had been digging, but it was not very cheerful. Come to think of it, thought Barney, rabbits and things that live in holes don't have any light at all. Not much fun for them with no windows. Couldn't he find some windows for Stig? What made it worse was that Stig had started a small fire in the den part. He must have just done it, because Barney had not noticed any smoke when he was sitting on the tree trunk. The smoke was filling the den, and there was no way out for it except to trickle through the gaps in the roof. It made Barney's eyes water, but he supposed it was on one of the things that you just had to put up with, like nettles. All the same, the place could do with a chimney as well as windows. He began to get used to the darkness, and he could see that the tunnel at the back of the cave went further back into the chalk that he had noticed. The digging tools were lying about, a bedstead leg, a broken cast iron shoe scraper, and an iron bar like the one he'd seen his father use on the jack to lift the car up. Stig was reaching up to offer Barney another turnip. Barney didn't feel like the turnip so soon after breakfast. Can I help you dig, Stig? He asked. I expect you're busy anyhow. He went to the end of the tunnel and picked up the bit of bedstead and began to attack the wall of chalk. It was not as easy as he had expected. The chalk in the inside of the hill here was firm, not crumbly as it was on the outside where the rain got on it. Barney's bashes with the awkward piece of metal only broke off smallish chips of chalk, and he was soon puffed. Stig, who had been standing watching him, took the digger from his hands and showed him how to dig out a hollow at the bottom of the chalk wall. Then knocked down large chunks which came away easily because they were not held up underneath. There was soon a pile of loose chalk, and Barney picked it up with his hands and put it in the small tin bath. When it was full, it was about as much as he could do to drag it along the floor of the cave towards the entrance. Stig helped him, and between them they lugged the load out of the den and dumped it. But Barney noticed that Stig took care to put it some way from his door. He supposed that piles of nude white chalk would let people know that something was going on. Stig let him dig next time, and he soon got the hang of cutting under and letting it tumble down from the top. Now and then they would come to a great flint embedded in the chalk, like a fossil monster with knobs and bulges, and they would have to chip round it, worry it, and loosen it like a tooth until at last it came free, usually bringing down a lot of chalk with it. They worked on happily for quite a time, taking it in turns to dig and load, and now then they would stop for a break and take a drink of water from the tin or eat a refreshing apple. Barney's jeans were white with chalk dust, and his hair and nails were full of it. He suddenly wondered what his grandmother would say. Then he suddenly wondered what time it was. In spite of the apples, his tummy was telling him that it might be lunchtime. You haven't got a clothes brush, have you, Stig? He asked. Stig looked blank, and Barney decided that he probably hadn't. His eyes fell on Stig's water pipe. Somebody had thrown away a vacuum cleaner, so there must be one of the brush things somewhere. Sure enough, he spied one. fixed as a sort of T-piece on the end of a long thin pole that was helping to hold the roof up. He thought the roof might hold itself up for a bit while he got the worst of the chalk dust off with the vacuum cleaner end, and it did. Stig was watching with a puzzled look, wondering why Barney should be pulling down parts of his roof to brush at his clothes with. "You're lucky, Stig," said Barney. "Nobody asks you how you got in such a mess. I've got to go now. Must be nearly lunchtime. Pity I can't ask you to lunch, but really," he thought, "nobody else even believes in him yet." "I'll be back this afternoon," Barney said from the door. "Thanks for letting me help you. Goodbye." Grandmother and Lou were late getting back from the town, so he had time to get the chalk out of his nails and hair and to look fairly respectable for lunch. They were too full of talk about how they had spent their morning to question him much about what he had been doing. Over the stewed apples, he was able to say quietly, "Granny, have you got any things you don't want?" "Things I don't want, dear," Grandmother repeated. "What sort of things? Chilblains, grandchildren?" "No, Granny, I mean things like windows and chimneys." Grandmother thought about this for a moment and then said that really she couldn't think of anything like windows and chimneys except windows and chimneys, and she thought the house had only just enough of those to go around. And Lou just laughed and said, "Really, Barney?" Then Grandmother said that it did remind her there were some tins and jam jars she had meant to put out for the dustbin man, and perhaps Barney would be a dear and carry them to the gate. Right, so that is what we've read today. You've now seen this table many times in your vocabulary lessons. So you're going to go back, rewind the video, and find 4 words that you have not learned or heard before, okay? Or maybe you've heard them, but you don't know what they mean. So I would like you to find 4 words now, and if there are more than 4 words, you're welcome to write down as many words as you like. Remember, vocabulary is very important. The more words you know, the better you're able to express yourself, the better you're able to write. So if you find more than 4 words, fantastic. Then in the second column, you're going to think about what those words mean, and you're going to write the meaning. And then at the end, you're going to go and Google those words. So you're going to go look them up and see what they mean. And if you have a dictionary lying around at home, you're also welcome to use that and then give the meaning. And then as a bit of a challenge, I'd like you to choose 2 of those words, any 2 words, and write them in a sentence for me. So I hope you enjoyed your reading lesson today, and I look forward to seeing you a bit later for maths. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.